So, Katrina, can you tell us a bit about Civic Square because it's such an exciting project, and I don't think I can do it the justice that you can. But if you just give us a very brief introduction to what it is and how it starts to incorporate that citizen mindset into a local community.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for having me. And Arena, really nice to hear some of the framing around your work, which definitely chimes with a lot of what we're working towards and experiencing in Birmingham. So Civic Square is an organisation based in Ladywood, an inner city neighbourhood of Birmingham. And our work is really focused on how people in their places can be at the forefront of our own social, ecological, and climate transitions. And really thinking about the social and the civic and the physical infrastructure that we need across our homes, streets, and neighbourhoods to allow us to do that. And I've shared a presentation in the chat because I know we don't have time for lots of slides, but it feels kind of strange to talk about our work without the visuals of all the people and the lots of different activities that are happening that make it all possible. Um, and to cut quite a long story short, Civic Square grew out of another organisation called Impact of Birmingham in the city, that was founded by a group of young Brummies who felt unrepresented in by the city's leadership, that they didn't really have a say in the direction of where the city was going, whilst at the same time the same city leadership was celebrating the young and diverse communities of the city as being the kind of real value in the heart of the place. So they started organizing and convening around the question of like, what does it mean to put people in the city at the forefront of grappling with the big systemic challenges around our visions, our hopes, dreams for the futures of the city. And Impact Hub grew into a movement, it grew into a physical space. And whilst it showed kind of the possibility of what's unlocked when you bring people together around their futures, around their visions, around their hopes, their dreams, but it also kind of made visible a lot of the structural barriers to why all of the energy, the momentum that's created around these spaces can't manifest beyond, or couldn't at the time manifest beyond these spaces. So Impact of Birmingham was growing, was becoming more and more successful. They were gaining more income from their business model, and every time the organization started to do better, the rent went up. And that story was on repeat repeatedly. So as the kind of young and creative communities of the city were generating more value, that value was being extracted to a landlord that wasn't even, in the city or in the UK actually. Um, and that was a story that Indy Johar, one of the close collaborators at the time, had predicted on the first day of the hub. He'd said, the hub is going to fail, but you've got to do it anyway. And so it was through that story of learning and experiencing and seeing firsthand kind of how this was playing out. Um, we knew, or the team knew, that it wasn't, just a one-off story. It was something that was much more structural. It was systemic. It was one example of how land in this country is being used as assets to extract wealth from communities. And so there was something deeper that needed to be designed and grappled with, which kind of paved the way for Civic Square in its current iteration. Um, so yeah, in 2019 they closed Impact Hub and founded Civic Square, and kind of transitioned from the city scale down to the neighborhood scale. A scale that we saw was big enough to be able to experience these big systemic challenges, but small enough to have agency and possibility to deeply grapple with them and to actually start redesigning layers of land ownership, of stewardship, of finance, of how we start to account for value within our place. Um, and this was at the same time that, as Irene spoke to, the pandemic hit this globally from the IPCC. about, the severity of the crises, the multiple crises that we're experiencing and facing. And so, yeah, that really sits at the core of Civic Square, and kind of, yeah, underpinning the the mission essentially, which is around the question of like, what does it mean for um, the climate transition and retrofit of our home streets and neighborhoods to be designed, owned, and governed by the people who live there?
And it's interesting that you um, mentioned there that it was kind of clearly not going to work on a city-wide level. And so the decision was made to kind of bring it local. What can we learn from that as a group? Sort of, obviously, we're not set up in the same way, but what can we learn about the agency we have within the borough we live to start tackling the challenges that we want to tackle around, community and climate?
Well, yeah, I think it's within our homes and our streets and our neighborhoods that we really experience and feel the effects of these systems that aren't designed to meet our needs quite viscerally. And so there's a lot of power in like getting together in understanding your hopes and dreams, understanding your shared experiences, your concerns, and then starting to learn and surface the existing skills and knowledge that exists within the community already, um, and passions and what do you have, then who might you be connecting with, where you want to bring additional skills or knowledge in. And I would really say that there's a lot of power in starting quite small and building the relationships and the social fabric and the foundations that actually enable us to relearn how to organize together, how to like move together, how to sit with our differences and not, all have to agree on absolutely everything to move forward productively. Um, yeah, I think it all starts with really coming together.
And how do you do that at Civic Square? How do you bring the community together? Obviously, there's us within the forum and those, but then obviously there's a far wider community that we need to engage to be successful in that.
Yeah, I think context is very different. It is like essential to this, and it's looked like lots of different things over many years. And I'll share some links in the chat with the tools that we've used at different scales at different times of the organization. I should say that in December 2024, we managed to purchase the freehold for a large industrial site in the neighborhood that we've been organizing around for the last 5 years. And so, as a physical demonstrator, a lot of our organizing and convening and bringing people together now is orientated towards the design and construction process of that. So, one of a role that I've been like heavily involved in is around our site as a classroom layer of organizing. So thinking about how the design and the ongoing construction process can itself be opened up to come together for imagination, for participation, for skills building. Um, so many different things are possible. So it's thinking about, what's needed, what can you do together, and then how can you do that in ways that's open, that invites people in, um, that has a role for everyone, really.
And I was just wondering whether you mentioned that kind of different approaches, like different attitudes. So is that approach helpful in engaging people who might have different opinions as well, that kind of openness?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to focus on what's important here. And I think the story that Irene spoke to is a really, really important one. And really finding our commonalities as opposed to our differences. I think, in these times, one of the things that's having the biggest impact is that we've lost all our social spaces where we used to come together and be with people that have different opinions, that have different experiences. Um, and so it's become more divisive. We've almost forgot how to sit with that, human difference and um, yeah, in that way. So I think it's a really important part of it.